Okay, so we're going to kick off. Any apologies for absence? Anthony?
No, Chair, and all the Hub Committee seem to be here.
Thank you, Janice.
Declarations of interest. Members are invited to declare any personal or disclosable pecuniary interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. Are there any declarations, councillors? No declarations. We will move on. Item 3. I've got no items requiring urgent attention. So item 4, confirmation of minutes. A copy of the minutes of the last meeting have been circulated at agenda item 4. If we can just go through those. Anybody got any comments on page 1? Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. And page 6. So can I take those as being a fair and accurate record of the meeting? Are you happy for me to sign them virtually or in due course?
I'm happy for you to sign, Chair.
Yeah.
Yes.
Happy.
Thank you.
Yes, no.
Happy.
Thank you. So agenda item 6 is the Hub Committee forward plan. You have in front of you the outline of the forward plan moving on from today. If there are any queries, I wonder if I might raise one and seek Mrs. Buckle's view on this. We're due to start looking at the medium-term financial strategy at our next meeting. Given the present difficulties that we're in and the lack of certainty about any way forward, including feedback from central government, Mrs. Buckle, I wonder if you could advise me on whether we'll be in a position to start that or whether we should think about deferring it until a later date.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Jury. Yes, we have been told by the Housing and Local Government Minister Simon Clarke that he's been in discussion with MPs and they are working closely with Cabinet colleagues on a comprehensive plan to ensure Council's financial sustainability over the financial year ahead. We haven't got any timescale around when the details of that comprehensive plan from government will be announced or issued. And therefore, on the back of that, I recommend that we make the medium-term financial strategy a report to the October or November agenda for the Hub Committee. We already have the September cycle of meetings where we're going to be setting our amended budget for this financial year 2021. And then I think the next committee cycle after that, so around October, November time, is when I suggest we would then look forward for the next 5 financial years, with hopefully the benefit of the hindsight of the details of that comprehensive plan, which is going to be announced by government.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Buckle. That sounds very sensible to me, that we should defer that until probably the October meeting and go from there. Does anyone have any objections if we do that? I think it seems sensible.
I agree with that, Neil.
Okay, thank you. Has anybody else got any other comments on any other aspect of the forward plan?
Yes,
I have a
Neil. Yeah. Really just looking at the plan, almost all of the subjects coming up might get, in a sense, amended or in some way influenced by the COVID recovery strategy that we're sort of moving into now. And it might just be worth asking the sort of owners of those plans at some stage whether they want to reconsider bringing those forward, or whether they want the various hub discussion, the recovery plan discussion groups to have a chance to influence them.
I think that clearly sounds very sensible. One of the things that I believe that we have been and that we're going to have to be moving forward from here is flexible and responsive. And I think that's exactly the point you're making, Councillor Cheadle, that we will have to move this around and adapt it and change it to suit what we're working on at the current time. Mr. Bates has come up with a comment. Is it a comment on that particular situation?
It was indeed, Chairman. Yes, thank you, Councillor Cheadle. We'd like to suggest that we do have a more comprehensive look at the forward plan, very much in line with what you're suggesting, and to make sure that we're not bringing forward new policies ahead of the recovery planning process, which is likely to significantly influence those. So my suggestion would be that we do have a further look at it and make those adjustments with the agreement of the Hub Committee at its next meeting.
Thank you. Does that help, Councillor Cheadle?
Yes, I think perhaps we're going to talk about it later, but the recovery group's initial discussions might usefully just have a quick look at that forward plan to see whether it's entirely valid to bring it forward, or whether in fact it perhaps should be delayed until the conclusion of the recovery group's discussions.
Yeah, I agree entirely, and I think lead members will have a very key role to play here. Councillor Edmonds.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Page 9, under portfolio area, it says enterprise, and the report is commercial investments update. The lead member is shown as myself, but I'm not enterprise. I'm wondering whether that should be Councillor Cheadle or what.
It's a moot point. You chair the working group. I'm enterprise. Between us, we'll work it out.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to do it, but I just thought I should just flag it up. In fairness,
my ego isn't bruised.
Yeah, the answer might be to reappraise the portfolio area as council.
Yeah. Okay, happy with that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any
comments from anyone? Okay, so we're happy as things stand at the moment to accept the forward plan and use that as the basis for moving forward, but with the rider that a lot of things are going to be happening over the next few months, and that we are going to have to be flexible and move things around and respond quickly. So I'm really happy with that. Thank you, members. Okay, is that another comment that's come in? Okay, so agenda item 7. Let me just find. Has everyone got in front of them the notes that have been sent round by Mr. Powell?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yep, I've got them.
Yep.
Okay. Obviously, you've got the paper in front of you. I view this as being, given the situation that we're in at the moment, the times that we're in, what has happened over recent months, as being possibly the single most important thing we're going to deal with as councillors in our tenure of office. It seems to me very clear that our local communities are going to be dramatically affected by the longer term effects, both mainly economic now, but also perhaps a resurgence of the health emergency over coming months and probably years, and that local authorities and local government has a really key role to play in managing the recovery and the building back of society in the way that we would like it to look over that time. So putting together this recovery plan, I think, is really, really important. We obviously presented the plan outlined to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee last week, and I commend that committee for the discussion that they had and the positive way in which they approached it and the ideas that were brought forward. And that has come back to this committee for us to look at and decide on the way forward from here. And obviously what we're proposing here is that we move forward with those ideas, that we set up initially a series of workshops. And I think this is really important because we've said all along that we really want to include as many members as possible in the way we drive this forward. We need to get as many views and as much involvement as we can in order to get a viable, imaginative and forward-looking recovery plan that is the best that we can do. And I really think there is a role here that local communities and local government has in leading this recovery. So the paper is in front of you. I'd be happy to take any questions before we move to the recommendations. Does anybody have any questions about the paper, the documentation and the debate so far? Councillor Edmonds.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Can I just put this question, I think, to Drew, if I may? Drew is with us. Obviously, Drew, I've been given this some thought, and this question is has cropped up. The corporate strategy, which runs until 2023, took a lot of time and resource to develop. In September 19, Council agreed a set of desired outcomes for each of the 6 strategic themes. The recovery and renewal objectives say that we will have regard to our existing 6 corporate themes. The proposals coming forward for the recovery plan seem to fit neatly into the existing 6 corporate strategy themes. So is it the intention to build the recovery plan into the corporate strategy, or as an addendum to maintain clear and consistent focus on what we're striving to achieve for residents and businesses over the next 3 years, rather than have 2 separate plans?
Thank you, Councillor Evans. I'd be very happy for Mr. Powell's view on that, and I would have a view on that as well, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Edmonds, for the question. I think at this stage, what we're trying to do, we're trying to look at what's in front of us in terms of our recovery approach. So, in these unprecedented times, a lot of the priorities that perhaps were set in the past may not be relevant going forward. They may well be. But at this stage, we're trying to assess, gather information and evidence as to what the change has been within our community, within the business sector, and within the whole of the community in terms of the impacts of the pandemic. So the plan at this stage has developed out of our incident management response. So as we responded to the initial stage of the pandemic, we formed various cells to deal with those acute issues, and they've sort of transferred into the bare bones and the framework of our recovery plan. So I think it's too early to say whether or not this would morph into a new corporate strategy, and obviously that would be for members to decide in the future. At this stage, I would consider that activity around delivering the present corporate strategy will continue, but new policies coming forward will probably be having to look towards the recovery plan and the evidence and the new priorities that members will identify through that planning process. So I think at this stage, it's impossible to say whether or not it will be a new corporate strategy, but I certainly don't feel as though we will not be giving regard to the priorities that members set in the past in the corporate strategy back in 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Councillor Cheadle, you had a question, I think, aimed for Councillor Edmonds.
No, for the Chief Exec, my question. I don't think Councillor Edmonds is the Chief Exec yet, but there's always time.
I wonder whether you were trying to link the two, that was all. But fire away with your question.
It's a tiddler, but just before I ask it, just reverting back to the previous conversation about the strategic plan and the recovery plan, which I think is a really good question, Chris. I would like to hope that after we've really understood the necessary steps within the recovery plan, we meld the two together and end up with a single plan that shows the direction of travel forwards, rather than the confusion of having potentially conflicting issues, one in the corporate plan that says we're going to do X and one in the recovery plan that says we're going to do Y. We must, I think, work hard to try and get the two intertwined and, as I say, come out with a single one. That's my personal view. The Tiddler question is simply a matter of detail on the schematic of the recovery plan. We've still not got anyone from the ELT in the business section. I've asked this about 3 or 4 times now, and I just wonder if there's any progress on in putting a name in that slot.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. I'm going to defer actually to my colleague, Mr. Brooke. I think he's probably on the line. I think he'll be able to help with that question. Thank you.
Mr. Brooke is chomping at the bit to respond, I can see.
Is it something in my face that gave that away? Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Cheadle, for that question. You're absolutely right. It is imperative that we get focus in that area and that we resource accordingly. It is a piece of work that's live, and we're looking at it right now. You'll be aware that we have a hole in our establishment since Tom Jones left us. What we've done at SLT is discuss how we could resource appropriately that role, but I think we're conscious that what was right then isn't right looking forward. So it's a little bit chicken and egg. The further down the recovery program we go, the better clarity we'll have on what members' aspirations are, and therefore what resource we need in place to support those aspirations. And at the same time, the longer we wait, the harder it is to actually move along on that journey. So we will be coming back to members with proposals on that through the appropriate channels in pretty short order, because we've got, I think, some clarity around it. What we don't want to do, of course, is start bringing, setting ourselves out a stall that we can't afford or isn't appropriate. So there's a balance, and we're very conscious that we need to fill it, but we want to do it properly. And I hope that's a measured way of tackling that problem.
Yeah, it would be nice, as we're going into the workshops, we're going to discuss the workshops and the dates for workshops and the like, to get the right people and the right seats at the start of the process rather than halfway through.
And that's a fair point, Councillor Cheadle. What I would say is that there are, of course, large areas of the organisation that overlap, and very competent and skilled professionals that fill those existing areas, and they will be there. So whilst a new face will, of course, arrive at some point, that's not to say that there aren't people at ELT level that are very competent and will move forward in the direction that members set. But I recognise the challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooke. Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. For what it's worth, coming back to the original question, and I agree entirely with Councillor Cheadle, it's a very good question. My view is much the same as Councillor Cheadle's, that I think we need to look at the existing strategy and what we set out as our desired outcomes, but we also have to accept that things have changed and we maybe have different ways of looking at things now, and the whole mantra of build back better would make it sensible that if there is a different outcome that we now think is preferable, that we move things along. But we do need to end up with one set of objectives and one strategy that comes out of all this. Councillor Edmonds, you wanted to respond to those comments, I think.
Well, yes, really just to add my 2 pence, that my preference, and the reason for raising the question really is my preference would certainly be to stick with one strategy, preferably the corporate strategy. That is our declared mission statement until 2023. It's a high level statement, and I think we should work with that statement, and by all means amend, include other items that are now relevant. That's absolutely correct. So that would be my preference, and certainly not running two strategies which will confuse pretty much everyone. And of course, we are accountable to our residents through the annual report in terms of measuring our performance as a council against that strategy. So I think it's important we retain the strategy. It took a long time to put together, a lot of thought went into it, including public consultation, and it may be advisable when we consider this point, when the recovery plan is completed, that we revisit the the desired outcomes that we agreed in September 19 for the corporate strategy, because they are very much in line, and I think they still hold good today in the light of recent events. And obviously we need to build on that, but I think they're still highly relevant. And so too, when I look at the results of the public consultation, and I still think those are incredibly valid when we look at what residents were looking for us to focus on, and I still think that holds good today. Plus, of course, further information and experience that's come to light in recent weeks and months. So very much in favour of one strategy, corporate strategy, including the recovery plan. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. I think we're all on the same page, so that sounds great. Mr. Powell, do you want to come back and comment, or did Mr. Brooke manage to cover it nicely?
If I could, Chair, just a couple of things just to add to Mr. Brooks' response. In terms of supporting the development work around business, we've identified initially Ian Luscombe because of his role as Head of Environmental Health and Licensing, where they have a lot of interaction with business, and clearly at the moment with the opening of the town centres, the hospitality sector and so on, his input there we think would be really valid. And additionally, Pat Weimer as Head of DM, recognising the connection between development, management, an effective planning system and supporting business. So that's the support that will be with Mr. Brooke at the moment, but as Mr. Brooke advised, we'll be looking to fill those posts in the future as well.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Councillor Sellis.
Thank you very much. This is not really germane to what we've just been discussing, so I don't know if anyone else has any questions. Is it all right just to fire a different question?
Fire away.
Thanks. It's relating to page 9, 6.3, the second homes. I was just seeking some clarification there. This was be with Mrs. Buckle, please. It says a significant proportion of the businesses, the 174 businesses that have not applied for for the grants which they're eligible for, are second homes, and I didn't understand that, and I was just seeking some meat on the bones, please.
Yes, certainly, Councillor Sellis. I'll just start my video. So with regards to that, if a property which is essentially holiday accommodation, if they're available to let for 140 days or more, they are eligible to be business rated. And if they are business rated, they would have been eligible for the first round of business rate grants, because they would have qualified for small business rate relief. And we think that when we look at the number of business grants that have not yet applied, some of those are holiday let accommodation, because they qualify for that, they're available to let for more than 140 days. So we are still actively going through all of the cases which we can see from our business rate database. They are eligible to apply for those business rate grants, and encouraging people to apply for the grants which they are eligible for. But that is a process that we are going to be carrying on working through. There is no date by which they have to have made an application yet. So BEIS, who are the government department for business and enterprise, they haven't put an end date on applying for those business rate grants yet, but that is something that we will be doing over the course of the year, is chasing up anyone that has not yet applied for those grants. Does that help?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Buckle. Councillor Moody, do you want to raise your question about the strategy?
Just, following on from Chris and others' discussion about combining the strategies together, and Chris mentioned that when we did the corporate strategy, we had a public consultation. I just want to know, are we intending to do a further public consultation with a modified corporate strategy?
I don't know if Mr. Powell has a view on this. My view would be, I think Councillor Edmonds made a really good point that the strategy is the strategy at the moment and has got some really good outcomes on it. I think we would be foolish to plough ahead with that when the game has changed quite so much without at least looking at it. I wouldn't envisage a full consultation, but part of what we're going to be doing does revolve around comms and getting the message out, and I would certainly want to be in a position where we're being very transparent about this whole situation and engaging with the public and with other councils, and if we do have a minor change to our strategy, that we're able to explain it, and it will be out in the public domain.
It's just that I'm sorry to interrupt, Chair. It's just that I feel that we need to take the public with us with any modifications we have.
And I think we must be doing that. We should be doing that. And I mean, Councillor Samuel has just popped up to say she will be taking this up as lead member for comms, and that's absolutely right. But Mr. Powell, I don't know if you've got any views on that, or I mean, yes. I think it's just about being open and being transparent and taking people with us. I don't think we're going to be changing the overall thrust of the strategy. There might be nuances about how we do it as much as anything.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I think it's important to sort of delineate between the two things here. We've got a recovery and renewal plan, which is how we're going to develop the work to look at what's happened and how we can recover and build back better, as already been said. And we've got a already adopted corporate strategy. So while they're separate at the moment, one is delivering against the council's ambitions, and the other one is looking at what's happened in dealing with the response phase and moving into recovery. In terms of consultation, I think undoubtedly we will be looking to consult with the business sector, with community groups and others through these individual themed areas. What that consultation will be like, when it will take place, and the extent of it will be determined by the work as we develop it. So it's important to to make that differentiation between the two pieces of work. The idea will be to get the workshops together, to get members to pick up all the learning from what's happened over the last few months. And then we'll have sort of short-term work, medium-term work, and longer-term changes as a result of that. But consultation will be vital. It's the community, the parishes, the towns who've had the biggest impact in terms of the response and the recovery. So it's vital that we engage with them through this process.
Thank you, Drew. I totally agree.
Councillor Edmonds.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Can I just move on to a different section of the report, please? And I'm looking at page 10, 7.1 and 7.3, and also page 12, section 10. I mean, 7.1 talks about the agile working capability and how successful that's been during this crisis, as it has been previously when we had the severe winter conditions a couple of years ago, and also 7.3 around the IT infrastructure. It's proven to be reliable and fit for purpose. So I'm really pleased to see those points made, and I'd just like to highlight those points. And also, if I skip on to page 12, which talks about staffing capacity and resource management there, and the flexibility that we've now got in the way we've staffed and able to move people around to different parts of the organisation. Great flexibility. So I think it's all credit to anyone who was involved in T18, and indeed credit to all the staff for the way they have been flexible and adapted to the change in their roles. So I think it's just a great well done in all of those areas. It just shows how well the council has performed during a very difficult period. Thanks, Neil.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. I think that's a really interesting comment, and certainly meetings that I've been in with other councils over the past few weeks, the common theme has been just how well local government has responded to this crisis, how flexible it's been, how it's managed to keep its core services going. We were certainly in a really good position, I think, for things like the agile working. There was a council this morning that talked about having to get 4,000, I think, laptops out to staff in the first week so they could work from home. Thank goodness we weren't in that position. That's a major unitary top tier council. So we were in a really good position, and I think thanks to everybody for putting us in that position and for working so hard throughout this whole crisis. Okay, any other questions before we move on to consider the recommendations of this report? I'm not seeing any, so I'd like to move the recommendations on the report, the 5 recommendations as shown. I'm really happy to take them all together. I wonder if I could have a seconder for that, please.
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you. Any debate, councillors?
Sorry, I'd lost my cursor. I'd just like to make one point, which is a sort of blinding statement of the obvious, I know, but the recovery plan, of course, isn't yet a plan. It's a framework. It's like a spreadsheet with no numbers in it. And what the purpose of the working groups will be, of course, is to populate the spreadsheet or the gaps in it. So I'd just like to say congratulations to Drew for drawing up the framework, but the hard work, which is actually putting in the detail of what we're actually going to do, is going to fall to the 31 councillors that we've got. And I just wish those listening, encourage them to muck in when it comes to populating the working groups and getting on with the hard work.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. I really echo that. We really do want to get as many views and as much input and as much expertise into this and thought into this as possible. Lead members are going to have a particularly important role to play, but the contributions of all other members will be welcome and necessary. So I know we had a discussion this morning, and we're going to make sure that lead members are put into some of the groups that will take place and asked if they can contribute specifically to those groups, and Councillor Cheadle and I will do that within our own group so we get a good balance. And I look forward to everyone contributing and feeling that it's going to be a worthwhile exercise and it ending up with a plan that we can all own. So that is the objective. Any other debate, members? In which case we'd like to move to a vote. Janice, are we happy to take exceptions to that and assume people are in favour unless they comment?
Yes, Chair, I think that's the best way forward on this one.
I think I am, as it's not there's not been much in the way of debate against the recommendations. So if anyone is against the recommendations, perhaps they'd like to show in the comments box, otherwise we'll take it as a vote in favour. Okay, I take that as a unanimous vote in favour, if that could be recorded.
Thank you, Chair.
In which case we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the revenue budget monitoring. If I could ask Councillor Edmonds to introduce.
Thank you, Neil. This is the first budget monitoring report of 2020-21 and the first report since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. The report covers the budget monitoring position for April and May, and as you would expect, reflects a significant decrease in our budgeted income of 371,000 for the first 2 months. Table 1 on page 18 of the report summarises the income and expenditure variations. Planning income is projected to be 40% below the annual budgeted figure, a potential shortfall of 161,000. Car parking income fell by 181,000 in April and May, with a projected fall in income levels of 30% from the 1st of June for the remainder of the year. A potential income shortfall of 468,000. At the bottom of table 1, it shows that we have a projected budget overspend of £1.028 million for 2020-21. The position takes into account the 585,000 government grant, which the council has received for COVID-19. The financial assumptions built into the report reflect the recent relaxation of the lockdown, car parking income being one example. The speed of recovery is very difficult to predict, but income projections could well improve over coming weeks, and this will be reflected in monthly reporting to members. Appendix E provides an update on the leisure centres. The most recent relaxation of lockdown measures did not include reopening of leisure centres, which has a direct impact on Fusion, who were hoping to reopen in early July. Officers continue to work closely with Fusion to establish the way forward, and members will be updated as decisions are made. The report excludes the impact of reductions in business rates and council tax income, as these do not affect the council's bottom line in 2021, apart from the pooling gain. The impact of this will be felt in 21-22 through the collection fund, so a delayed impact, but we still need to plan for how we will cope with the reductions in income. It's also worth noting that the council's cash flow position will be adversely affected this financial year, as payments to preceptors such as Devon County have to be made in full by the council. We will have a much clearer picture of how much our collection rate has reduced as we receive further information on actual monthly payments received. The report confirms that budget monitoring will continue on a monthly basis, and as the anticipated relaxation of the lockdown continues, amended budget proposals will be put together for members to consider an amended budget for 2021. A member budget workshop will be arranged in August, supplemented by informal council briefings. The amended budget will be presented to members in September. And as you heard just now, an amended medium-term financial strategy will be provided in October/November, with the benefit of any announcement from government on financial support for councils. The draft recovery and renewal plan sets out the strategic objectives for the recovery and sustainability of the council's financial position. Future service delivery discussions are currently taking place with each head of practice area to discuss what services might look like under the new normal. A thorough review of all expenditure will be needed, which takes into account a review of statutory expenditure against discretionary expenditure and the corporate priorities. The council has a limited amount of reserves, as summarised in the report, which could be used to balance the 2021 budget if necessary. Reserve levels will be kept under constant review. The council is well placed to meet the financial challenges arising from COVID-19 due to its prudent financial management over previous years. It is important to stress that the council is not in financial difficulty, and it is recommended that we maintain clear focus on the budget monitoring strategy set out in this report and the objectives detailed in the recovery plan. In September, with the benefit of further evidence of the speed of recovery and, we hope, confirmation of further financial support from government, we will have a clearer picture of the council's financial position for both this year and next. The leaders of councils in Devon wrote to Robert Jenritt, Secretary of State, drawing his urgent attention to a £85.7 million shortfall in funding across Devon councils. A copy of the letter is appended to this report. during a video conference with council leaders and chief executives on Thursday, Mr. Jenrick said in relation to local government finance, "We are working together with the Chancellor to ensure your finances are stabilised for the remainder of the financial year. A plan is required to stabilise finances and allow you to proceed with confidence to continue to provide essential public services." On receipt of any such announcement from government, an FSG, Financial Stability Group meeting, will be arranged to consider the up-to-date financial position of the Council. And finally, Chair, there are 4 recommendations detailed on page 13 of the report. The first 2 ask members to note the income and expenditure variations and loss of income during April and May. Recommendation 3 refers to an amended budget for 2021, and finally, that this committee resolves to undertake a review of all earmarked reserves. With your permission, Chair, I will hand over to the Chief Executive, Mr. Bates, to give a short overview of the regional and national context. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Councillor Edmonds, for what is a very comprehensive introduction to the report. I'd like to pay tribute to the Council for the prudent way in which it has indeed managed its finances in the past, which puts it in a very good position in terms of how it approaches the current challenge. I think it's fair to say that every council in the country is in the position where it needs additional funding, and we're working really hard to make the case for West Devon, working with colleagues in Devon. Mrs. Buckle and myself are also a member of a regional working group involving finance directors from across the southwest, which is drawing together information about the position of all the councils in the region, and we will shortly be writing to the Secretary of State further requesting additional funding through that route as well. So as I said, every council in the country is in a similar position of needing additional funding. It's important to say, I think, that at this point the government has not made an allocation for loss of income, and will be strongly making the case for that. The first 2 instalments of funding have essentially been to cover the costs, additional costs that upper tier councils have had in responding to the crisis, and an allocation towards costs. But as yet, we haven't had the funding that we need, particularly as a district authority, to cover loss of income, which is particularly important to us. And as I said, we'll be making that case. So I think it's fair to say that the situation is serious. We'll be working hard to bring forward our plans. We'll be doing that through the recovery planning process, and we'll bring forward a revised budget in September, as you've described. But I think the important point to make is that we're starting from a good position as a council, and we do have reserves that we can draw upon. I'm confident that we will be able to come forward with a plan which will stabilise the budget for this year and leave the council in a good position to move forward. Thank you very much. I'd like to hand over to Mrs. Buckle, if I may, at this point, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bates. So with regards to the budget monitoring report, part of the way that we will address this going forward is by doing monthly budget monitoring reports. Members will be aware that in the past those reports have been quarterly, but we want to do this on a monthly basis so that month by month we can track exactly what's happening to our income streams and also our expenditure. So in Table 1, we have summarised for members the position as we are forecasting it going forward. So there are a series of assumptions there against each of the budgeted expenditure and budgeted income streams. So our budget for 2021 was set at 7.2 million. We've already received government grant of 585,000. We have, through the budget monitoring process, identified some savings that we already know we will have. So, for example, some savings on staff and member travel and expenses. And also on our garden waste income, we already know from looking at the ledger that we've already overachieved that income target by 25,000 this year. So that is really good news. Then going down the table, it's split into the areas of customer services and delivery, place and enterprise and governance and assurance. We've gone through all of our main income streams and made an assumption around the loss of those income streams over the next financial year. Obviously, this is the position as we see it at the moment. If those positions changes, that will be updated in the next monthly budget monitoring report. So, for example, planning income, our budget for the year is 402,000. We've made an assumption that we could be down on that income stream by 40%, which equates to 161,000. With regards to car parking income, we know what our actual losses were in April and May, and we are assuming a 30% drop in income levels from the 1st of June onwards. So when you put all of that position together, that is projecting an overspend of just over £1 million for this financial year. I would like to draw members' attention to the management actions which are set out in section 7 of the report. So with any budget monitoring report, the main thing is to set out the management actions about how are we going to address those as a council moving forward. So we do complete monthly government returns on what have our costs been for COVID and what have our loss of income streams been. And we do that on a monthly basis. So we report to government exactly what our losses have been and any additional expenditure. We are continuing to lobby with Team Devon for further government financial support. As I said, we will be bringing monthly budget monitoring reports to members. We are going to be reviewing the Council's capital programme and all of our earmarked reserves. And we've discussed the medium-term financial strategy. We'll come back to members in October. We are also very close to closing the financial accounts for this year for 2019-20. And that outturn position will come to the Council's Audit Committee towards the end of July. We're also lobbying government for a change in some of the rules for councils, for example, some of the accounting rules for capital repayments on borrowing and capital receipts flexibility. And we are pressing government for an early decision on some of the factors that will affect our 21-22 budget. So, for example, new homes bonus funding, which the government have previously said is going to go in the next financial year. And we haven't had any details around the implications of that or what may replace new homes bonus funding. Negative revenue support grant and also rural services delivery grant. And so around August time, we are looking to set up a member budget workshop to explore all areas with members, and that will take the format that it has in previous years. So we are looking to do the interactive model again on the Excel spreadsheet, which members will be familiar with, whereby we set out the amount that is needed to balance the budget, and then we put a series of options there, and when members either click yes, they could support that option, or no, they don't wish to support that option, it then completes that interactive Excel spreadsheet and gives a view on what implication that has on the bottom line and whether that balances the budget. So we will keep to that format because it's a format that members are familiar with, and that we feel we've had positive feedback from members on those workshops in the past. So I think that's probably all from me for the minute. I'm very happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I say thank you to Mrs. Buckle and your team for all the work you've done in yet another really comprehensive report at a difficult time, and when a whole load of other stuff has been thrown at your team as well with the business grants and so on and so forth. So thank you for that, and thank you to Councillor Edmonds for your as usual very comprehensive introduction, and to Mr. Bates for his assessment of the regional position. I have been in a meeting this morning of the leaders of Southwest councils where we have agreed to sign a joint letter, which I think Mr. Bates referred to, that was put together by the chief execs of Southwest councils. Feedback we've been getting is that no other region of the UK is presenting such a united face in their discussions with central government as the Southwest, and so that can only help us, I think, in that we're going with a very clear message, and we are all working together and singing the same tune, at least, even if sometimes the words aren't quite the same. Councillor Cheadle, you've got a question, I think, for Mrs. Buckle.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Lisa, it's sort of one I've rehearsed before, but given that the current assessment is that we will end the year with the financial year with a deficit of about £1 million. If the government grants that we're hoping for are not forthcoming, we're going to have to start perhaps dipping further into our reserves than we have previously declared we would wish to. Your estimate on when we might reach the sort of point where we need to make decisions like that?
So we're working on options for members at the moment, and those options will be presented to members as part of that member budget workshop in August. We are hopeful that the details of the comprehensive plan that's going to be announced by government might be sometime in July. We've got no confirmation of the timetable on that, but we are hoping it's going to be in July, so that could then form part of those considerations as well. And then it will be the September cycle of meetings that we will be formally presenting those in an amended budget report for members, which will first go to the overview and scrutiny in early September, then go on to the hub committee in the middle of September, and that will require council approval towards the end of September. So that is the timescale that we are working to at the moment.
Yep, thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Buckle. Councillor Ewings.
Thank you, Councillor Jury. Just a question to ask: when will the financial strategy not group meetings, but meetings take place? Because we were having a monthly, went to every other because it was too much, and then COVID. So will they be resuming, please?
Yes, they will. And my understanding is just as soon as we get some definitive information back from government about a comprehensive settlement, which they have promised is coming. So as soon as we've got that information in front of us, the group will be convened and we'll be looking at the options we have and how we start to formulate that medium-term strategy. So thank you. Good question. And we don't like to have been in such a hiatus, but there really isn't any point in starting to make detailed plans until we get that feedback from the government, which they have promised is coming.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
Any other questions from anywhere? In which case, Councillor Evans, can I ask you?
Sorry, I have a question, Leader.
Councillor Sellis.
Yes, thank you. Lisa, how's the invest to earn going? I did read in the report that there might be difficulties. Have any difficulties in paying rents surfaced recently since the report was written, or have you got any concerns?
We are going to be bringing a report on the commercial investment portfolio to the audit committee at the end of July. So that's where that report will normally go, and it's on the work plan for that. In this report, as set out, I think it's in, section M, all we've done at the moment is we've put in a general assumption, which is a national assumption really, around putting in 25% modelling for both our commercial property and also our employment estates. It is very early in the financial year really to be able to assess that with any certainty, and as part of the audit committee meeting we can go into details around that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Buckle. Are there any other questions? In which case, Councillor Evans, would you like to move your recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendations, 4 recommendations that can be found on page 13 of your agenda papers. Thank you.
Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mott. Members, we're into debate. think the nature of the reports and the very comprehensive summaries have answered everybody's questions. Clearly, we're in this position, we are where we are, and I think we'll move forward in our usual way just as soon as we get a bit more information. But thank you to everybody for your inputs. We'll go to a vote then in that case. Again, I'll take this in the absence of any debate by exception. So if anybody is not in favour of the recommendations or would like to abstain, could you indicate in the comments box? I've got nothing coming forward, so I'm going to take that as a unanimous vote in favour, if I might, Janice.
Duly noted, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of the agenda. So thank you, everybody, for your input today. Thank you especially to those who've contributed to the papers that have been brought forward. I think we're looking at a very interesting time ahead over the coming weeks. I'm sure it's a problem that we could all have done without, but actually it's what we were elected for, I think. So let's knuckle down to the task over the next month or so and see if we can get something going with this recovery plan, because it's really important for our communities and the way forward. So thank you everybody for your input today, and here's to a fruitful next few weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader.
Chairman.